What's up guys? This episode of Barrier Breach is a little different, and that's because we are going to explore a different horror game franchise. I know you're used to these types of videos being on Puppy Combo, but I thought it'd be fun to maybe try exploring a different game, and this time around, we'll be going over Fears To Fathom Ironbark Lookout. This is arguably this franchise's most popular game, and of course, since I already played it, I figured it would be a perfect opportunity to Barrier Breach this, since I think many of you would be interested in it. Anyways, without wasting any more time, I hope you all enjoy. So one thing I love is when games physically use a flat 2D image to represent a menu screen, or at least part of a menu screen. Here you can see that rather than just being text on screen, the Fears To Fathom logo is legitimately a game object placed on the map right here in front of us. I think it's simple methods like this that game devs use that really add to the charm of the game, even if it's as small as this. We as a player would never know this, and although this is pointless to know, still really cool seeing an interactive menu like this, and I use that word interactive very lightly. Apart from that, zooming out will now allow us to take in this environment fully and see what's around us. If you're familiar with this game, then I'm sure that you know that this place is actually a playable area later on in the game, and it's just cool to see it stripped down to something like this, since of course we'd never get to see beyond what our camera shows us. We are going to spend a long time checking out this environment later on when it has all the models and geometry added, but for now, I figured we'd still take a look. So the huge lake as well as most of the surrounding environment was removed for this version. Despite this, I still managed to add the rest of the trees and stuff, giving us a more full look at what this is supposed to look like, but again, don't worry, we'll be checking out this area in its entirety very soon. Just off to the distance, here we have what I believe to be Watchtower 12, which is the tower manned by the character Connor, who we talk with throughout the game. This is a very low poly tower, and that's because this is so far away that it wouldn't even be noticeable. Here we can see a very efficient use of a flat plane that was used to represent light coming from a window. Tactics like this is exactly what makes game devs so talented. If it's so far away, why go through the hassle of modeling and texturing an entire building with windows and lights when you could just use something like this? As mentioned earlier, a lot of the map has been removed, leaving behind the bare bone structures. You can see that these trails cut off abruptly since they have their own dedicated environments that the player is teleported to when getting into proximity. So when you first begin Ironbark Lookout, you start off driving on the road in a van, passing through the road and admiring the scenery. Usually the game has this filter over the screen that makes it really hard to see, on top of the fact that everything is dark and foggy. As usual here on Barrier Breach, I was able to remove all of this, leaving us with this really clean image that makes it a ton easier to visualize and look at everything. Even though we are in the van the whole time and can't really see, Rayll Studios, the people who make Fears To Fathom, went above and beyond and created this fully detailed and immersive environment, most of which players just look past. Here you can see this large lake as well as many trees and terrain that surround it. Here you can see a van that is scripted to pass by us while on the road. We also have all of the birds here, and I'm happy to say that these are all fully rendered 3D birds. They didn't have to make them 3D since they're so far away, but I still appreciate the fact that even something as little as this still gets love. Besides that, there's a few antenna radio tower thingies here in the distance, which is cool. I know it's very yellow and warm right now, but don't worry, I did end up learning how to turn it into a neutral color later on. So yeah guys, all in all, very cool for an environment that the player could maybe see 10% of, if at that. So next we make it to this small populated area that of course holds the diner that we go into very briefly. I think most of us just drove past here, not really thinking and looking at the other buildings and streets, so that's what I aim to do here. One thing that you will notice about these Fears To Fathom games is that a lot of time and effort was put into making the setting feel alive and fleshed out. Even down to the scripted events and triggers, there is always a car coming through this street no matter what. These vehicles are on a cycle that begins when one ends, resulting in an infinite pool of cars constantly going by, which you love to see. I think it'd be very pointless for me to explain how every building looks like, so I'm just going to show a quick montage of everything, just so you guys can get a feel for this setting. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, see how there's graffiti on the back of this building? There is actually no reason to have this here, since it's impossible for the player to see this from behind, but nevertheless, it's still here and really reinforces the idea that Rayll Studios really does put so much passion and love into these maps. It's things like this that I hope make this world feel a lot more alive next time you play. So here you can probably tell that I figured out how to remove the warm/yellow hue from the game, and now hopefully it's going to be a little bit more enjoyable to watch from here on out. Definitely the main attraction of this area is the diner, so let's go over it. I don't know if it's just me, but diner settings just have a different type of chill vibe that no other type of establishment or restaurant could ever replicate. There's just something about the everyday man going to his local diner to grab a meatball sub or burger that just hits differently, whether it's in real life, in a movie, or in a video game like this. Here we have this guy having a drink, the chef cooking up some mean meals, Santa having a jolly good old time eating a cheeseburger with onion rings, this dude having a burger, this really suspicious guy that we may or may not encounter again, and finally, of course, our beloved waitress who's carrying some chicken nuggets, a sandwich, and a burrito. Oh, how lovely. I was able to no-clip to the kitchen in the back, which was very cool since we could only see this through a small circle window, so here's how this looks like. It's so awesome seeing all the detail that was put into this diner. Even the food looks so satisfying to me for some reason. Each food packaging has its own custom texture that really adds to the detail. 25% bigger than before, they say. Cap. You know they be filling them up to the brim with ice cubes. Notice how these two different types of fries have a different packaging. I really don't think they had to do this. Like honestly, they could have just labeled both of them fries and used just one texture. But nope. Another beautiful display of attention to detail that would be missed by 90% of the people who play this game. So when you order your food, the waitress of course has to go to the back to retrieve it, but have you ever wondered what she was doing back there? I mean, yeah, what do you expect? This is something we saw in the State of the House barrier breach, where the Butcher 2 also just walks into a wall since there is no reason for there to be an animation. The waitress then appears with the food that you chose during your brief dialogue with her. At some point, this creepy guy named Silas makes his way to the bathroom, and I always wanted to see what he was doing in there. Pause. Funny enough, he just reverts back to his eating animation, and I found this extremely funny. For a brief second, I thought bro was actually gonna sit on the toilet and use the bathroom. But hey, I'm not one to judge what one does or doesn't do when in the restroom. I was thinking at least he was just gonna stand there idle, but nah. After enough time has passed, he simply just disappears. He doesn't make his way back or anything, he actually just despawns. Now I think it's somewhat clear that Silas actually breaks into your van and locks himself in your bathroom, which is why you're not able to open it, but taking a look inside we see nothing there. I don't know, I was kinda hoping we'd see him in there just chilling, but maybe I'm asking for too much. Besides all that, we have Brody out here having a burger to himself, and that is all this environment has to offer. On to the next. So we don't stay in this place for too long, but there is still some interesting stuff to look at. If you don't recall, this is the area where we meet the other park ranger named Billy. The road we were on is quite extensive on both sides. You can see how far back the road starts even though we spawn so much further than it. It's set up with power lines, trail markers, and oil spills. If you keep driving ahead, you'll eventually meet a dead end, and this is what that looks like. This building right here is completely hollow on the inside, but does connect to this tower right here. It kind of feels like I'm still playing the game. Like the player can't get here through normal gameplay, but when I position myself in this way, it just feels like it was meant to be. Finally, at the top of this antenna tower is this red and white cube that's just floating here. It looks weird now, but when the filter is overlaying the screen and everything is much darker, you can see how this was used to represent a red light from far away. When we enter this little station, you will notice that Billy is already standing here with the double barrel in his hand waiting to jump scare you. I find it very weird that Billy is able to see us on the outside through the window, but for us it's not see-through. So while you're talking to Billy, many of you might have noticed a strange suspicious fellow walking in the background, which we can barely see through the window in front of us. I think no one's surprised to see that this is Silas, aka the same dude we just saw at the diner who vanished just after using the bathroom. I found it really funny that not only is his model walking on air, but also the fact that this animation never ends. Literally. This dude just goes on walking in a straight line quite literally forever. I'm going to show a very sped up version of this, but yes, I did follow him around for several minutes just to see how far he went. He even started to walk off the map. This is also conveniently the direction our player has to go in order to proceed further into the game and reach the tower. Finally, I just wanted to very quickly show you all the last environment that I glitched into this one, as well as this truck that's driving on air. This is literally a scene straight from Harry Potter. The truck eventually stops just short of the station that Billy is in, and
what the Sigma?
So we make it to the main part of the game as promised, and you can see how there's a lot more things that were added that weren't here before when we first saw it at the beginning of the video. This large lake is one of the most obvious additions that was previously missing, and for some reason I was able to cover it up completely. I mean, that's cool I guess, but let's add this beautiful lake back into the map and begin our exploration. So I first wanted to take a look at the water, which is coming from this waterfall near the end of the map. There are a bunch of large rocks, but behind that we can see where the water begins. I was looking around for any creepy people that were also hiding in these woods, and I couldn't find any, but don't worry, there is something creepy later on in the video, and I can't wait to show you that. If we follow the path, there is an electrical tower right here that is fenced off. The sign is facing the other way for some reason, and so is this one as well. You would think they'd want this sign to be visible to the people that are walking through here. Again, here we see another red and white cube at the very top of this tower, and it's used in the same way as it was before. When we make it to the fork in the road, it alerts us that there are two paths that we could take. One takes us to the tower, and the other one takes us on a path called Lacey Trail. Of course, like many of you, I wanted to see what lied down the Lacey Trail, so that's exactly what I ended up doing. Everything is as expected, a bunch of trees, grass, and plants, but maybe there are a lot more to uncover. Oh, never mind. The trail cuts off right here. This is actually because when you're nearing the end of this path, your player is teleported to another environment, aka the place where we find the abandoned campsite. We will explore that very shortly, so don't worry, but for now, how about we just appreciate the nature? No clipping over here felt weirdly peaceful. When you take away the scary noises and add a ton of light, this place does feel genuinely cozy to me. It's not scary at all, and this is one of the best representations of a natural environment in a horror game that I've seen. The water cuts off right here and is clearly overlapping the terrain, but that's pretty much it for the wilderness side of this map. Trust me, I tried looking for some secrets hidden deep in the woods, but as you can see, it's just nothing but trees and grass. So the main point of interest is the tower that we stay at, and although most of you have played and seen this already, I'm still going to show you all some close-ups of some of the objects. Here is one of these scripted events where we get alerted of some campers who are illegally camping somewhere down Lacey Trail. To no one's surprise, the smoke is simply just emitting from the ground. Still very cool though. The birds also make their third appearance during this scripted event as well. Once you make it far enough down the trail, you eventually get teleported to the campsite, which is, of course, its own dedicated environment. You can see how tightly dense this area was packed with trees, which creates this illusion of an infinite forest when you're down there on foot. But zooming out, we can see how the rest is simply just empty. The campsite is pretty normal, boasting a ton of supplies such as flashlights, pans, and a rope, as well as food such as hot dogs. One really cool thing I found when tinkering with the settings was that this was supposed to be a lake rather than a pond. I'm not sure what influenced this last minute change, but it really wouldn't matter since it's pretty much the same and they both serve the same purpose. I was also able to spawn in this large mass of rock that is placed at the start of the trail. I'm not sure what the relation is with this since we have seen that there isn't anything like this when going down the trail, but whatever I guess. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, here is something very creepy. I know you all know that someone begins stalking you during this part of the game, and you can even hear them walking around. I'm of course talking about this cultist right here who is watching us from behind a tree. I don't know dude, this just hits different just seeing it like this now. During my gameplay, I swear I couldn't even see him back here because of the grainy filter and the dark lighting, but now we get to see a full view of what this is. Like, actually this is genuinely creepy now. I didn't know bro was just staring at us like this. I hope this creeps you all too next time you play this, because wow, if you look closely, you can just barely make out a face. I just wish we could see what's fully under there. Oh, cool. Yeah, just like the butcher, I was able to remove his mask and reveal what's under there, and you might notice a familiar face. Now it's a little low poly and slightly unrecognizable, but I believe this is Silas again, which you can tell by the skin tone and the hair. Only the front part of his face is rendered, leaving the back of his head completely empty, so it kinda looks weird and funny. I was able to remove his body, his chain, and his hands. I always love doing stuff like this because it just breaks the game and makes it very wacky. Like, look at bro. Once you get close enough, he begins crouching away very slowly, which is very cool to see. After a short while, he just stays in place right here out of view from the player and remains here in this animation until you leave. I know it's weird, but I went ahead and removed all of the terrain, leaving behind everything else, and here's how that looks like. So at some point, this cultist makes his way to your tower and begins harassing you. Here you can see the animation of the cultist sneaking around the rim of the tower. Once he makes it in front of your door, he begins another animation where he places down his ritual thingies, and now we get to see how this full animation looks like. This is exactly what Barrier Breach is for, to be able to watch and spectate events that are difficult to view normally. As far as I know, unless you open the door, the player actually isn't able to view this sequence as you hide. So getting to watch this is so educational and informative. Like, look at how detailed this animation is. He's placing the candles, lighting them up and everything. Again, I'd like to emphasize that most players are more than likely hiding during this part, so you can truly see just how much attention to detail was put into almost everything in this game, even the things we don't see. After he's done, he crouches his way down the stairs, eventually despawning near the bottom. Here we can see something similar with our friend Billy when he comes to our tower to give us supplies. I don't know why bro looks like a locked character. This time around, Billy continues walking down the trail until he despawns just short of the mini bridge. Finally, for our last encounter, we have the guy with a flashlight down here, and of course it's Silas again. I know many of you probably already suspected this, but it's still very cool seeing this up close. This is like the 4th time he came and stalked us. He needs to go away. At last, we make it to the most memorable and iconic part of the game, which is of course the end, where we see the cultist performing some ritual off in the distance. It's so satisfying finally being able to get up close and personal to this, as I'm pretty sure this is the first time anyone is able to see this in this way. There are a total of 8 cultists all gathered around the fire, with 2 of them tending to the flame. We of course have this dead camper, which is actually the person we tried helping over the radio, but unfortunately was captured by the cultist. Here I darkened the lighting to give it a bit more of a natural look, and it really does change the vibe now. I believe this cultist with the white robe is actually the leader, or at least the one with a higher status, since they're the only one rocking this variation of that attire. When you take a picture of them, it causes them to start running, but did you know that they stop right here and just begin running around in circles? Yeah, it's pretty funny just seeing them gather up like this and start running into each other. As for the other guy, he spawns near the sign and begins running to our door, which I will show you all. Once he makes it to the top, he begins banging the door attempting to get in, and after a while, he eventually does. This is how this looks like from different angles. He then makes his way to the side of the tower until we as the player run down the stairs. Once we hide, we get to see the cultists attempt to look for us, but of course to no avail. He then enters the shack and stands there forever until we leave. Finally, here we have the animation of the cultists chasing us to our van. So that is finally it, everyone. This was so incredibly interesting and fun to do, since this is the first time we barrier breached a different horror franchise, and I am very satisfied with the footage I was able to gather. Fears To Fathom is another horror game series that I really enjoy, and I'm sure many of you do too. So I really hope you are all okay with this edition of Barrier Breach, since no one really asked for it. Anyways, I hope this was enjoyable to watch, and hey, this only opens up and allows us to explore even more games from some of our beloved indie horror game developers. As always, it's been your boy Blind, and I hope you all have an amazing day. I'll catch you all in the next one.